This is the Tame Aperture podcast.
Open the pod bay doors, Cal.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
Welcome to the Tame Aperture podcast, where we talk all things movies from first-time directors, indie, art house, and much more. Go check us out at www.tameaperture.com for previous episodes and to make suggestions on future episodes. Today on the podcast, we talk the 1998 neo-noir film Following by Christopher Nolan. A young writer living in London follows people in the hope of using their lives in his novels. But the hobby becomes an obsession, and he soon finds himself going further than intended. The film was released in April of 1999 on a budget of $6,000 and runs a short 70 minutes and was written and directed by Nolan himself. I'm Gabe Wienendahl, filmmaker, film instructor, and movie enthusiast, and I'm joined today by Alan Martindale, veteran podcaster and editor. Alan, how the hell are you?
I'm doing good, man. I'm I'm a little disappointed.
Uh-oh.
Because Brandon picked this movie.
Yeah.
And he's not here.
Right.
And I had some questions to ask him. Because this seems like, the plot of this movie seems like something that he would do.
Like something he would make?
Yeah, no,
Oh.
something that he would do in his daily life. I can picture him. You know, honey, it's a late call time tonight. You know, we're going to be shooting all night, go to bed, and just going out on the street and just following people around, being a creeper. You know, just like with his long hair, and he's got that paperboy hat on, and just kind of creeping in the shadows. I can totally see it.
I can see that too.
I can totally see it.
He may have done that, and too bad he's not here today to explain that.
Because he would explain it in very explicit detail.
In explicit detail, give us all the 411 on his exploits as a shadower.
I'm just convinced. I'm convinced.
I wonder, when he made this suggestion, I don't think he had seen the film.
I don't think so either.
So now that he's seen it, or the hope would be that he watched it, even though he's not here, he did his prep work. Do your homework, bitch.
Do your homework, bitch. Come on.
Come on. That he would, even if he hasn't done it, now that he's seen the film, he probably will.
Right.
Would be my guess.
He'd be so sloppy, though. He'd be so sloppy at it. He'd be so sloppy at it.
He won't be quite as sly
Definitely
as the
not.
young man, which is a no-named protagonist, by the way. You get into this film, and there is no name to the lead character.
Right. Well, he says his name is, I can't remember. He tells Cobb.
Does he tell him it?
Yes, but I'm not sure it's a real name. I think he gave him a fake name.
Yeah.
And then later on he uses
I think
a
it's
different.
to throw him off.
Yeah.
Because in the credits, he's credited
Right.
as the young man.
Well, and Cobb is also the name of Leonardo DiCaprio's character in Inception.
I noticed that.
Yeah.
Now, I have seen this film many, many years ago, and I don't remember a whole lot of it. This was probably a decade ago, like 10 years ago, and it was on Netflix.
Yeah.
It was on Netflix. It's not there now.
Nope.
But it was then, and I remember watching it, and initial reaction was like I was a little bit skeptical and a little bit bored.
Mm-hmm.
But on this rewatch, some of those things and some of those feelings changed a little bit.
I would agree with that.
And so, essentially, had you seen this film before?
Yeah, same thing. Like, it was years ago, and it was kind of the same thing. I think I maybe even stopped halfway through.
I think
I was kinda
swear I
bored.
did too. I was like,
It was just like, eh.
it might be a mood thing.
Right.
I that's funny because we're probably in the same situation.
But,
And-
but this time it was definitely more intriguing. It was definitely slower at the beginning. In fact, when I hopped in the car, Jess, my girlfriend, was watching it. I told her, you should watch it. I think you'll like it. It's pretty good. And she just texted me when I got here, like, that ending. Because I could tell she's not really into it when I left.
Yeah.
She's on the couch, and it was just like, okay.
yeah.
But it definitely sucks you in more as you go along. I like the editing, though. I think that's what does it.
The editing's fantastic. We'll get into that. Also, the ending is powerful. I think it's really well structured, and it has to do a lot with how they put it together editorially.
Mm-hmm.
But we'll do a quick, we read through the synopsis, but a quick introduction right out the gate. Give me a quick impression on your thoughts on Nolan in general. So this film's about 20 years old, just a little over. It's his first feature. knowing that, as before we get into the film and a little bit of scene by scene and all the ratings and everything, what's your takeaway on Nolan?
I'm actually a big Christopher Nolan fan. I know it's a little controversial in people who are really into film because it seems like people either love him or they can't stand him.
Yeah.
I'm a big Nolan fan. Like I love Inception. I think Inception's it's one of my favorite movies that came out in the last however many years it was. Like I love it. I've watched it 4 or 5 times. I could still watch it again. I love it.
It is a rewatchable.
Yeah.
Like you can see that movie multiple times and always walk away with a little bit of excitement. It's entertaining. It's a good emotional ride. I think that is a well put together film.
Right.
And I think it deserves mostly the applause that it gets critically and from the audiences. I think mostly it got pretty good reviews overall.
I think so. Did you think that was convoluted and confusing?
I didn't.
I didn't either.
What I thought was a little harder and more complex of a storyline was later with Interstellar.
Yeah, Interstellar was it was quite a bit sloppier. I actually still liked it though, but it was a little bit sloppier.
So I went to that film. I guess that came out in 2015. I want to say.
Let's see.
No, 2014. 2014. Because I went to that. So get this. Me and Brandon and Todd, our friend Todd, we were at the American Film Market in Santa Monica. And the market ended that day. We wanted to go see a film. It happened to be November. Interstellar had just come out that week or the week before. And we had driven down to Hollywood to go see the film at the Cinerama Dome on Sunset Boulevard. And which is just a cool, iconic location. And went to the film, came out. Todd and Brandon were jizzing in their pants. They loved it.
As Brandon is wont to do at
Brandon,
times.
It's true. But they loved it. They thought it was this fantastic movie. I was more confused and kind of more skeptical.
Sure.
I didn't understand it all.
There's some dumb shit in there too.
And there's things, but the point is we walked out of there and I was... there was a level of disappointment. I was like, it wasn't. They were loving it, just applauding, and I was just like, I just shrugged my shoulders, like,
Yeah.
I really did. I watched it later, and there's a little more growth and appreciation for me as I watch it again. But that movie, and you're talking about like Inception, or people saying maybe Inception's convoluted in the way that it's put together. I think Interstellar is much more convoluted.
Oh, for sure. I agree.
In what he's trying to do. But
plus the whole love is the way to fight.
That was the big thing for me. And you would think as a father of a daughter who I love to death and would do anything for, that would be a powerful emotional draw. But it wasn't. It just didn't. The idea that love will save it after you've built this scientific world and these complex situations, it didn't do it for me.
And especially, now this is going to sound weird considering some of the subject matter of his films, but he is kind of more grounded in reality. Obviously, Inception's crazy, wild, but you think about Batman, the Batman trilogy.
But here's the thing real quick, because you're right, but also I agree with you. It's not necessarily, Inception's really about a father trying to get back to his kids.
Totally.
I
connected with that.
Yeah,
way
I did
more,
too, for sure.
Way more.
And I like Inception a lot, but you're right. Like he does tend to go what appears to be heavy and complex, but if you break him down on a more subtle level, it's a dad trying to get back to his kids.
Right.
And even in an Interstellar, it's kind of that idea too, where he's trying to get back to his kid, and then the relationship between him and his daughter. It's those are the real draws, and then it's built on these real more convoluted, more complex ideas.
For sure.
So you're right. He's kind of, there is a based in reality concept.
Yeah, he made Batman realistic, if that's even possible. I mean, it's not.
Well, we haven't
realistic.
even talked about those yet.
Right, and I love those movies. I absolutely love. I'm not a big superhero film. But I love that trilogy. I think it's so good. Obviously, The Dark Knight is. I mean, it's probably the greatest superhero movie ever. I wouldn't even. I hesitate to call it a superhero movie because it feels like it's on another level.
And everybody loves The Dark Knight. I love The Dark Knight. For me though, Batman Begins
Yeah.
is just and I had seen an interview with Nolan, and he said, we didn't initially build this to do sequels. We just kind of built it as a one-off, and I like that. It's similar to Star Wars: A New Hope.
Sure.
Where like it's a one-off standalone.
For sure.
And it doesn't need anything else to support it. You know?
Sure.
And I
For
like
sure.
that about Batman Begins. It's as an origin story to a comic book character. It's so good.
It is, because you actually see the journey. It's not rushed through.
Yeah.
Like a lot of them are.
You see his growth and his change from who he was to who he becomes. And then, of course, you're right. The Dark Knight is great. It's so good. I mean, we know Heath Ledger's performance is fantastic.
It's insane.
Christian Bale's great. Christian Bale's a great Batman.
I think he is too.
I
think he is too.
The voice aside, or the silliness of
the
the
voice
deep,
is a little weird, but
still, it's so good. The thing about that trilogy, though, and this is not a knock on Nolan, but it's you can't keep that trajectory going.
Right.
And so for me, Dark Knight Rises, it's okay.
I thought it was good until the ending. It got a little wonky at the end.
I didn't have it's that rise of, and that, like I said, that trajectory. It's almost, and that's not a knock on him. I think that he did a great job. He's a great filmmaker, but like you can't really keep it sustained. I mean, we like sports, so the comparable would be like LeBron James doesn't win championships every year.
Right.
He gets to the finals, but he doesn't win. And that's kind of how I see that third installment of that trilogy. It's like, okay, it doesn't compare to 1 and 2.
For sure.
And it kind of falls off that path of trajectory. It's still good.
Yeah,
he
it's
made
still
the
good.
finals, but he didn't win the championship.
Right. Let's call this a conference finals.
I agree.
Because it was. To
be honest, it could be a semi-finals. A conference
semi-finals. Could be. I love the character of Bane, and there was a point where he just kicks the shit out of Batman, and I love that scene. That stuck with me. But the twist is really stupid. The ending's really stupid. So there's just some things in there, and you kind of see this happening more as we get later into his career, where things just get a little bit dumber.
Yeah.
I didn't know. I saw Insomnia. I didn't even know he directed that.
Yeah. I haven't seen Insomnia since it came out.
To me, it was kind of, it was okay, but it was forgettable. But I haven't seen it since it came out either. So I'd be interested in going back and actually watching that again.
It's funny because I don't recall it being the most memorable of Al Pacino's performances.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
They're classical Al Pacino performances.
Right.
But that doesn't ring a bell in his portfolio for me.
Right.
So
Robin Williams is good in it, though.
Yeah. He's
really
good in everything.
He was a great actor.
And this is not just a thing of like, let me give a memoriam to Robin Williams. I can't really think of anything he's not good in.
As an actor, I loved him. I wasn't a big fan of him as a comedian, though.
I thought his stuff was pretty good.
It was a little too spazzy for me.
For me, I guess that's why I kind of liked it, because it's probably opposite of who I would be.
Right.
And I kind of liked that he just was unabashed and went for it.
Sure.
But he does great in that film. That's his third film, Insomnia. Following is his first film, as we mentioned. And I think we got a good consensus on Nolan. I think we both have a pretty heavy appreciation. We like his stuff. I'm actually, this year, excited to see Tenet. I am
too.
I think that looks great.
Yeah.
And John David Washington, Denzel's son, who stars in it. So it's if he carries the mantle that his father's, put together,
big shoes, man.
That's huge shoes to fill.
I don't know how you do that.
Huge shoes to fill. But it looks really good. I thought it looked really good. So we'll wait to see. But let's jump back to I want to keep saying The Following, like I have to put the article in front of it, but it's not. It's just called Following. And from the opening credits, he always has some kind of musical assistance to his film. His scores are always really they're strong. They're almost melodramatic, but not in because sometimes that can be a bit, for lack of a better word, like cheesy or.
For sure.
His melodrama, and it works.
It fits. It definitely fits.
Like it doesn't feel campy or anything of that nature. But the opening credits is right from the get-go, a bunch of insert shots. And I like how he introduces the idea of like the box. it's the opening credits, this melodramatic music playing, and it's a guy searching through a box. And it kind of opens up a door of curiosity for me about what's going on. And then immediately we get introduced to our protagonist, who is the young man, is what we'll call him. And he starts, I think, well, it actually says here, and I don't know that this is the name that he gives Cobb later, but it says Bill. Is that the name he says?
I think that's what he tells.
So maybe that truly is his name. But it's just kind of an interesting thing because they don't credit him that way.
Yeah.
That I recall. So, but then we'll call him Bill.
I guess, yeah.
We'll identify him as Bill because that's easier.
I remember him having a couple different names, but Bill's a lot easier.
Bill's easier.
But from the get-go, just based on my previous attempts to watch the movie, and I again, it's been years since I've seen it. It opens up and it's black and white, and it's the 4:3 aspect ratio.
4:3, yeah.
So immediately I'm thinking, oh god, this is going to be another pretentious Martin Scorsese.
You're like, who's that knocking
at my door type bullshit, and I'm already primed to hate it.
Because so by the way, for those that don't know, the 4x3 is the sidebars, the black bars on the side doesn't utilize the whole framing of the 16 by right. So
right, it used to be what TV was
exactly
was shot in.
But you were thinking pretentious.
Yeah, I'm thinking, oh god, another great director. He started out super pretentious and in love with his smell of his own farts. And I was pleasantly surprised that that's not really what happened. I still don't quite understand the choice to go with that aspect ratio, though.
It's probably something to do with cost association. I mean, you got to remember they were shooting on 16 millimeter. I'm not sure why. It could have been how they eventually deliver it for print. There's a lot of things I'm guessing here, but I'm just saying I almost think it potentially had something to do with cost.
Okay. See, I was thinking it was probably a creative choice, but that
could,
probably
it could also be that. So I don't want to speak out my ass like I know what I'm talking about. But I just know that maybe it had to do with something in processing and print later on, because you're not using as much, you don't pay as much.
Could be.
But Bill starts speaking about his habit of following people. I like the narration. I think narration's tricky.
Yeah, it's hard to do well.
If you're a good writer and the monologue flows, it can be compelling.
Mm-hmm. And
I think it really is compelling.
I think so too.
The thing about Nolan is I think he's a super smart guy, like intellectually, like based on interviews or watching his films, of course. Sure. He's very, he seems almost a bit serious.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not a knock. He's like very knows who he is and knows the framework that he wants to be in. I think his writing is really good. He writes this monologue where Bill starts talking about his habit of following people and why he started. And essentially we get the concept that Bill's a writer, or I should say an aspiring writer. He's not really a quote unquote even professional writer.
Right.
But he's trying and he wants to be a writer. And really what ends up happening is he's doing everything and anything he can that doesn't involve writing. And anybody that's been a writer or written even small things understands that the difficulty of writing.
It's hard.
It's very hard.
It's hard.
What I find interesting about writing is that it's the simplest thing to do in terms of accessibility because everybody has access to a pen and paper.
Right.
Or in our day, a computer. But just having access to the medium doesn't make the approach to it easier to do. And Bill's just doing that. He's like, everything I can do to not be there, sitting there trying to type or write, I'm going to do that. And what it leads to is him observing other people. And he basically introduces it and says, I started observing people. And then after I started observing them, because he was kind of looking for motivation and different influences for his writing. And then it leads to him actually kind of an adrenaline junkie. It's almost like a voyeuristic approach in some ways of like following people, not in a, and he starts telling this to the, which is the, who's the, we'll find out later in the end of the film who he's talking to. But ultimately, he's just explaining that he would follow people around, and it wasn't even and particularly women.
Right.
But but the way he says it, and he I feel like he comes across believable. It wasn't even a sexual thing, and he does say that. He says it specifically, but he was just curious about where people would go, and it felt like he almost would create a connection with them, even though they didn't know he was following them.
Right. Well, and he said something. There's a line where he said, "Have you ever been to a stadium for a football match?" And for us, we go to basketball games a lot. But have you ever done that actually, where you're in a stadium and you look around and you actually do pick out someone in the crowd?
Yeah.
And he's absolutely right. They become a person. They're not just a member of the crowd anymore. They're an individual now.
Yeah.
That was a very interesting way to tie it together, and it made perfect sense.
100%. It goes back to that idea of good writing. And also you're 100% right, because what's interesting is, like, if you go, it could be a game, a sporting event, it could be a theme park.
Right,
like,
right.
Those observational qualities, we all have that tendency to some degree. We can be transfixed on something or someone. One of my dad loves when we go to like Disneyland, or if you go to a theme park, he almost gets a kick on sitting on a bench and watching
people. Right.
And this is not an uncommon thing or a creepy thing. Like, a lot of people do that.
It's people watching super fun. It's super interesting.
And you're right. It becomes a little more personal in a sense. They're not just a floating object walking by.
Right.
They're actually, like you said, and like they say in the movie, and like Bill explains, they're a real person, and there's an attachment of sorts.
And especially like if you're on the street, and I heard someone say this once, and I don't remember who it was, but I'm going to lift it and make myself look smart. When I'm out there, when I'm driving, or when I'm in public doing something, other people just feel like obstacles to me. They just feel like things that are in the way of my progress to get to where I'm trying to go, or to do what I'm trying to do.
Driving especially.
Especially driving. But when you are able to kind of focus in on someone, like, have you ever seen someone 2 different places in the same day?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you notice them. Like, you notice them the second time. And me, I pay a little bit closer attention to them and kind of what they're doing. And they become they're no longer an obstacle to me. Now they're kind of a point of intrigue.
Yeah.
It's like, it's just a weird coincidence that you see them. So I kind of like it in that respect. And it kind of makes me wonder what it would be like if you just decided to follow someone all day.
Yeah. And he initially calls it shadowing.
Shadowing, right.
But, it would be kind of interesting. I mean,
Brandon's doing it right now.
That's
why he's not here.
That's why he's not here.
Yeah.
So, but Bill, he's when he's doing this voiceover, he's actually talking to somebody. So it's not just a character delivering a narrative voiceover, but we don't know who he's talking to, but it's the concept later is revealed that he's actually revealing information about his protocols as a follower. So he starts talking about this habit of following people. Really well done, well written, like you had explained, and also made it feel relatable so that we could understand what was happening. And then it kind of goes on in storyline. He gets busted. So like what happens?
Because he breaks his rules.
Because he breaks his own rules.
Right.
And he's very intrusive, and he's following this guy. And I love how this plays out, because when you're watching it, you're kind of intrigued with Bill, and you're kind of like, ooh, who is he following now? And they go into this cafe, and he's eyeballing this guy, and then all of a sudden, you think something's going to happen. You don't know you think it's just kind of normal, but the guy that he's following stands up and confronts him, and you're like, oh shit, it's going to get serious here.
Right.
So this is revealed at the cafe. This is a guy by the name of Cobb, and he starts quizzing. He sits right down, has no reservation about confronting Bill about his, I know you've been following me.
Right.
I know what you're doing.
I know you're not a cop.
You're not a cop. You're not a detective. Whatever it is, he starts kind of drilling into him. And I love how this character is introduced, because you just think it's a guy that noticed someone's following him, but the reality is Cobb is a bit of he's a petty thief, essentially.
Yeah.
Or he's introduced that way. He confronts him, and it kind of lends itself into Cobb being okay with it, in a sense, right?
Yeah.
And then they kind of go on this little adventure together, Cobb kind of invites Bill to come along with him.
Takes him under his wing a little bit.
Takes him under the wing a little bit, and they break into a flat, into a house.
And I just love how Bill, no reservations about doing this whatsoever.
And this Alex Hawke is the actor who plays Cobb. I love his performance.
Oh, he was great. He was great.
He's so good.
As far as I could tell, this is the only feature he's been in.
Yeah, you don't see a whole lot of other stuff, and you can read some of his background and biography. And he went to school for architecture.
Yeah, now he's an architect in New York.
And so he graduated from Princeton with a master's degree. But that's such an interesting. He's so good.
Right.
His delivery's so good. He's a very straight, like you mentioned, very straightforward kind of cat in his character. And so they break into this flat, right? And I love this too. I love the writing here because Cobb starts to explain to Bill that, you have this kick of following people. I have this thing of me going into people's houses and when they're not home, of course, and disrupting their environment and their life and making them realize what really matters based upon that disruption, like getting them out of that catatonic state of just normal flow of life. When they come home, they see everything's been upended, and it's a reminder for them, of different.
Right.
And I love that.
Because what did he say? Once something's taken from you, you appreciate it, I think is what he said.
Yeah.
Something along those lines.
Absolutely. And that's what he's doing. So he goes in and he's not, and I say petty theft because he really only steals very little things, and he's more interested in kind of, just like we just said, upending that person's home. Right. It's like there's years ago there was Dane Cook. Mm-hmm. He did this stupid stand-up where he does a bit on B&E. It's called Breaking and Entering.
Yeah.
And he's like, I always had a fantasy to break into someone's house, just right through the front door, like when they're gone.
Right.
And then take a lamp and then leave.
Just one little thing.
Yeah.
Well, that's what Cobb's doing.
Exactly.
That's exactly what he's
exactly
doing.
what Cobb's doing. Because he'd be like, and then I wanted to be home when the dad came home and the kids were all around and the dad was just mind blown, confused.
Right.
Because he's like, wait, you're always going to be like, where's the lamp?
Where'd the lamp go? Where'd the lamp go? Right.
And this is what Cobb is doing.
Right.
He's breaking in, and he find it interesting that he kind of, he's able to identify people based on their homes and what they have.
He nails them too. He nails
them.
He could be a shrink.
So they break into this house that they're in, and he starts telling them that it's the age range, they're mid-20s or later 20s.
They just barely moved in together.
College graduates, and all this stuff. And Bill's like, how do you know all this? You don't know all this. And what I love about this, what I thought was funny, is he holds up a CD, and it's a UB40. And he's like, that's how I know. It's a UB40 CD. Among the other things, but just like a little comic relief of how he's figuring out.
Well, because he says, music tells you a lot.
Yeah.
My favorite part of this whole scene, though, is when he decides to frame the boyfriend for cheating.
So previously, which we didn't see, Cobb's already broken into a house, and he pulls out girls' panties.
Right.
And he puts them inside the boyfriend's pants in the laundry. And he's framing him so that when the girlfriend does the laundry or sees the laundry, she sees someone else's panties.
And he says, what did he say? Just give him something to talk about.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's hilarious. It's hilarious.
It's great. And so they break into this flat, and then he goes into the kitchen. They start having wine. He want to drink.
Drinking their booze.
Yeah.
Hanging out.
This is where it kind of got exciting because I almost thought, they're going to get through this whole scene, and they're going to leave. And then they'll maybe do another one. But I liked the little excitement here that he brought into it, which was you hear the door open.
Right.
And it's a girl, and you hear her talking to a guy. And you're like, oh, shit, they're going to get busted first things first.
Right.
And I love this scene, too. I thought it was hilarious.
Dude, he just handles it.
Cobb's
no
a
big deal.
smooth
He knows
operator.
exactly what the fuck he's doing.
He's a smooth operator.
This is where he and Brandon would differ. Brandon would panic and barrel out of that house. He would just run.
Stumbling,
Stumbling.
hair flopping. Brandon,
Dropping
by the
girls'
way,
panties on the way out.
we're ripping on Brandon because he's supposed to be here. So
Because he picked the movie.
Yeah.
He picked the movie.
So he's going to get it all podcast. Yeah, he'd be stumbling. But Cobb handles it expertly. Smooth operator. And I love, he's very intellectual, like very, his ability to adapt is incredible.
Mm-hmm.
I would probably admittedly be like stumbling and be like,
oh, yeah, exactly.
or bursting out.
That's
like,
what I would do,
you know,
for sure.
something to that effect. But I love how Cobb handles it, which is basically, it's almost like he's acting like a real estate agent, right?
Right. I think he's saying that they're there to see the house, if I'm not mistaken. Or no, you're right. You're right. He's the agent.
He's some effect of showing the house for a new potential renter.
Right.
And you got to remember, Cobb's dressed in a suit and tie, super professional
Looks like
looking.
a businessman.
Looks like, so it almost could pass for that.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas Bill is he's a little more of a disheveled type of guy, long hair,
and
kind
unemployed writer.
Unemployed writer,
yeah.
exactly. And by the way, going back to that cafe scene real quickly, Cobb nails it. He calls Bill out as a writer,
Yep.
which I think is funny. But the owner of the house comes and Cobb plays it off. They walk out like, oh, I guess we'll have to come back at a later time. And he's like playing the whole thing up.
Right.
And then they bolt out of there once they get out the doors and they run up to the roof of the apartment complex. This is where Bill's like, what the fuck's going on? It's interesting to kind of see his response to what just happened versus Cobb's. Cobb's like cool as a cucumber.
And he's like, oh, shit, that usually never happens.
That never
It'll
happens.
happen again. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. And Bill's like, how are we gonna get out of here?
Right.
You know, he's like, he's all confused. And this is where you can see the difference between the two characters. That comes into play a little later too.
Mm-hmm. You can just see right up front how Cobb so easily manipulates people and so easily manipulates the situation and is so smooth in everything he does. And that becomes very important later on.
Very important. And he's, the thing about Cobb to me, like, even though that becomes important later, Nolan does a good job giving it that twist, which we'll get to.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't remember foreseeing that or realizing that that's how it was going to turn about. But keep that in mind. Cobb's a smooth operator. Bill starts to become one a little. He's learning from Cobb, so the apprenticeship takes hold, and he kind of, starts to like kind of mold himself after Cobb. But we're about 20 or so minutes in. We're like, Bill has a bit of. He's starting to kind of. He likes this idea of who Cobb is and what Cobb's doing. This is where there's an introduction after Bill and Cobb leave this house that they broke into, this flat, where we see an intercut scene of Bill beat up, like his face. He's lying on the ground. He's got a bunch of gloves shoved in his mouth.
Not only that, he's wearing a suit and tie. He's got his hair short.
Completely different looking, shaved.
He looks like Cobb. He's dressing like Cobb.
Exactly.
Kind of emulating, and he's just beat to shit. And he's got some plastic gloves stuffed in his mouth.
And this becomes a conventional build editorially. So we now know, and this presents itself later where time and space, they change. It's not linear fashion. So this introduces that concept and that convention going forward.
Well, and this is where I think it could have got really sloppy. It could have gone off the rails. Like if you're not a very talented editor and you're trying to cut in this non-linear fashion and tell the story, I can see how it could go off the rails very, very easily. They did a good job of building the suspense, giving you just enough information, also putting you in the middle of situations where you're like, what the fuck is happening? Like there was a point there where I didn't know if it was Bill, because first he's long-haired, looks disheveled, he looks like an unemployed writer. Next he's dressed up like Cobb. Yeah. So I'm like, is this the same guy or is this a new character? I didn't quite understand, and I think that's kind of on purpose.
Yeah, that first shot that we see him changed as his look as a character, it's initially a little confusing. But I think it's placed at the right time because later when you kind of repeatedly do that,
right,
the convention's been built. So it's like, okay, here we go.
Right.
And you're like, whoa, that's a little, what's happening? And then you see it again and a few more times all the way throughout, and it builds that convention. So now we're starting to place it that it's not happening at the same time. One's in the future or one's in the past, based on where we're at in the middle.
To me,
of the story.
the way I kind of organized it in my head was there are essentially three different, I guess, eras of the story. I don't know what other word to use. There's
just timelines, right?
Yeah, timelines. Like there's disheveled Bill, there's dressed up Bill, and then there's beat to shit Bill.
Right.
And that's kind of how I organized it in my head. And it was actually done so well that we're on one timeline, and I'm like, well, I can't wait to see what happens in this past timeline.
Yeah.
Like, how did we get what happened over here? How did he get beat up? What's going on?
Yeah.
So I think the way it was edited was the whole key to this movie, because it's kind of like Memento. Have you ever seen it cut forward? I haven't either, but I've heard that it's just stupid. It's not good, because Memento is all, if you haven't seen it, it's Christopher Nolan's second film, and it's all cut backwards. So the beginning is really the end of the story,
right,
and it goes in that
direction. It works itself back.
Right. Mm-hmm. And if you reverse the editing and you watch it just straight through, it's not even a story. It's just a dumb thing. And so this, I feel like it's maybe not to that extreme, but I do think if it wasn't edited in this way, I'm not sure it would have been as effective.
Yeah, we have, I like what you're saying, because you have essentially the three. You have almost pre-Cobb, disheveled Bill, emulating Cobb, the nice, he's now becoming Cobb in a sense, in his own way. And then in some ways, post-Cobb, because we find out later that Cobb's the one that's put a lot of that, he's beat him up, right?
Yep.
So, but they place it, like you talked about, they place it in the right spot, and they build the convention so we understand it. You know, the thing about it is that like you said, you could get real confused here.
Mm-hmm.
I hate that in movies in general. And you mentioned Memento, which is a great movie. I really love Memento a lot. And the edit on it's amazing.
Yep.
But I hate, and it's not confusing. It takes some thinking, and there's different mystery boxes that open, and you're figuring things out. And this has that as well. And I love the way he did it, because you could cross that other threshold of like doing something just to be confusing, and you're just building something to confuse the audience with no agenda. I really hate that. Like, I've seen that in other films, and I just don't like. We're just trying to do that intentionally to kind of throw you off base, and it has no connection to the actual story.
Nolan's really good at doing this kind of
really
stuff.
Really good at it.
And even if he's not messing around with time, like if you look, and I hate to keep bringing up Inception, but the way that he's transporting you from place to place to place with, dreams within dreams, he's really good at doing that. Mm-hmm. And keeping the continuity and keeping you engaged and not bringing you to the point where you're like, what the fuck is going on? Like, this is just stupid. Because there are a lot of films out there that, like you said, they do that. And I don't know why they mess with the time and space that way.
They're just not as strategic as he is.
Right.
And, yeah, his intercutting of most of his films, and you can watch all his films. I mean, there's a great scene in The Dark Knight where there's a bunch of intercutting. You have Commissioner Gordon, or at the end, the way he builds suspense through the intercut when Batman has to make a decision.
Yep.
It's like the intercutting of those storylines. He's kind of a master at that.
He really is. He really is.
But it's almost like he's thought it through and seen it that way in his mind's eye. Do you know what I mean?
You have to, because I don't think you could just film it and then chop it up this way.
I mean, there's always, I think I agree, and there's also like always little things that happen, but yeah, you almost have to have, and that's why I think what makes him such a good director is he has the editorial mindset.
For sure.
From the get-go.
Well, and that's funny, because a lot of people say that he should cut his movies down way more than they are.
A lot shorter,
yeah. And I understand that a little bit. I've never gotten bored in a Christopher Nolan movie, though. And every movie, I think the only one I haven't seen of his is Dunkirk. I just haven't got around to seeing it yet.
I loved it.
Yeah, I hear it's great.
That has a bunch of parallel editing. In other words, there's a line of action going on here, a line of action going on here, a line of action going on here. They're all intercut, and it's beautifully done.
Okay. And that's definitely on my list. Probably one of the next movies I watch.
I listened to a podcast like a week or so ago. It was the Rewatchables. Bill Simmons.
Mm-hmm.
And they had Quentin Tarantino on.
Oh, did they?
And they did 3 episodes with Tarantino. One of Tarantino's Rewatchables is Dunkirk.
Is it?
And he talked about how Dunkirk is a modern masterpiece.
Well, I got to watch it. I mean,
so you should watch it.
I have to watch it because I love Nolan and I love the way he does this. And I've never gotten bored in one of his movies. Even like we talked about Interstellar, it's not one of his best. Dark Knight Rises, not one of his best. I've never been bored and I've never been confused. As much as he screws around with the time and space and the editing, I've never really gotten to the point where it's like, this is too much. I don't know what's going on and I don't like it.
And he does that again here. And I think his ability to intercut is if you're looking as an editor, which we both are, if you're looking as an editor, there's a lot of kind of admiration there for what he's doing.
Yeah, I honestly don't know how you do it effectively. I mean, that would be
well, it's like I think you have to have, when you're filming, you've got to have a real strategy about how you're going to put this thing together and how it's going to structure. Because a lot of times directors will just go and look at a scene and they'll base it on coverage or this or that, and they won't see the interconnection of it all until later. But I think in his case, he's got
the meticulous process has just got to be mind-numbing to any other human being.
Which, for me, is interesting too, because one of the side notes to this trivia of this, or the side notes to this film, is that this is his first film. They had little to no money, and they shot it over 52 weeks, over a year, on Saturdays.
That's crazy.
Because all the actors had full-time jobs.
Yeah.
So the only time they could actually film was Saturdays. And I watched an interview with him, and he basically said, we kind of pieced it out. We'd shoot on Saturdays over a year. So that's what, 50, we'll say 52 Saturdays. But that's crazy.
To be able to do that and still not lose sight of where you're going.
That's the thing, because if you've stretched it out over 12 months, and when we're watching it, we can't identify, because I think that's a tough thing to do over your actors, whatever it is. You were able to make it feel so seamless over that time. That's pretty incredible.
Well, I mean, look at Look Who's Knocking at My Door. Harvey Keitel changed like 5 times.
Yeah, it's like 2 years or about a year and a half.
Right.
And it doesn't carry the same seamlessness that this does.
And also, I mean, if you think about it, just from a filmmaking perspective, to able to keep your actors engaged in this project for that long and to keep them coming back. I mean, I got to assume, what was the budget? $9,000?
It says $6,000.
$6,000.
Now, you got to remember, it's like 98-ish. So what does that translate in today's dollars? I'm guessing. I don't know what inflation is, but maybe that's $20,000.
Okay. You're still not paying these actors a whole lot.
No.
At all.
No.
And anyone who's done a micro-budget project before knows how hard it is to get any crew or any actors engaged over a long period of time when you're not paying them very much.
It's a hell of a producing effort.
It really is.
Which is produced by Emma Thomas. And Emma Thomas is Nolan's wife.
Right.
So she's a hell of a producer. I mean, he produced it with her, but she's got to be carrying a lot of that weight.
Shit, that just, the whole idea stresses me out to no end.
I actually love it in the sense of like being a low to no budget filmmaker, but it's almost aspirational and inspirational.
Absolutely.
Where you can go, look, I can take a very limited amount of money and limited amount of resources, and I can make a really good movie.
Yeah.
Because he does that.
Talent's all that matters.
Talent
and drive and passion.
Passion is huge. So Bill, after he's met Cobb and they've kind of gone through it, he kind of starts to build an admiration for Cobb. He meets a blonde woman, which is literally the character's name. That's what it's credited as, the blonde. Definitely.
She says her name too.
She does.
I can't remember what it is though. I should have written it down.
And it doesn't say in the credits, so I'm just going blonde woman.
Let's call her the blonde.
And they meet, and he kind of starts flirting with her and kind of getting to know her and understanding who she is. And this is all kind of within the time and space of after he's met Cobb. But then it cuts again because the next scene, it cuts to Bill. And when he meets the blonde woman, right, he's like, he's now shaven, or shaved, I should say, and in the suit.
Yep.
So it's already kind of, once again, playing with time and space. But once again, it's not confusing to that. You kind of understand what's going on. And then it cuts to him calling Bill for some advice. Bill calling Cobb.
But even before that, when he meets the woman in the bar,
yeah,
she talks about her ex-boyfriend, or she says, "I'm with someone."
That's right.
Points to the bald guy, and I'm not sure where exactly in the story because it's chopped up quite a bit. But we learn that this guy's very dangerous.
Yeah,
he's very, very dangerous.
Like almost mafia.
Yeah.
Guy.
He's a pornographer, but he's obviously
underground criminal.
Yeah. And he's very jealous, and he
right.
doesn't like her to be talking to other men, and that's a big plot point later on.
Yes. So after we get introduced to the blonde and we get introduced to her criminal boyfriend, there's a scene where Bill calls Cobb for some advice. He's asking him about weapons or protection. You know, what's interesting here is he doesn't say a gun.
No.
He gives him the idea that you could use this or that, and then he says you could also use a hammer.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's light and you can throw it on the back of your waistband, and if you hit him in the right position, it can be lethal and deadly.
Right.
The way that ties into the previous scene is that he's looking for protection because we've been introduced that he's made some kind of relationship with the blonde, and it would appear that he's probably in trouble with her ex-boyfriend criminal.
Right.
And
which at this point we're thinking maybe this would explain why he was all bloodied earlier.
Yeah.
Which it doesn't end up being the case, but
right.
You're thinking that's probably the cause of it.
The trick of the edit is like that's probably what's happening. And Cobb basically tells him, use a hammer.
Yeah.
I found this interesting. Actually, I saw an interview with Nolan about this film and also about the idea of wanting to use a hammer. That's kind of an interesting weapon to use.
Yeah.
Being a former student and then being a film instructor myself, I love that he said, and a lot of times in student films, the gun is predominant, and he said it's a dominant factor in how they build in weaponry or whatever it might be. And usually, without the right resources and the right technical effects, the gun doesn't carry with it a level of authenticity, the way that it's used in student films and things like that.
For sure.
So he's like, and there's cost associated. You can't, squibs and blanks and all these kind of things that you can use. If you don't have resources to those, it can be hard to make the gun feel real. Or even, he said, finding a gun, an actual prop gun that actually looks authentic. And I loved his description because he was even talking about the weight of the gun and all these kind of ideas that it's cool because as a filmmaker, when you're in a run and gun, you almost don't think about those things.
No.
This is what makes Nolan such a great filmmaker is he's always thinking about that other layer. So he's talking about that, and he said, we just decided to use something that was real, and we could actually create a prop that made sense, that had weight and actually could carry with it like authenticity, even though it wasn't the predominant choice of what you might originally think of when it comes to protection.
Well, it makes sense because, how many student films have you seen with a gun? And it just doesn't look right. It doesn't look real when they're holding the gun or the way they're handling it. It just
I've been teaching film for 10 years. 98% of the films have a gun.
I know. I was gonna ask
98%.
Ask you that question.
98%.
It's a shitload, man.
That's a lot of films.
That's ridiculous.
I just loved his answer there. That's actually a
great.
clip I should show to students.
You should.
Is like, look, here's what Nolan says.
Fucking turning in assignments with guns in them. It doesn't feel real.
No, it doesn't. And then after he calls Cobb for advice, and we get a scene where Bill breaks into his own house. He basically kind of takes the baton from Cobb and kind of takes the assignment where he's got to stake it out and do a follow and like find out if when they're leaving and then break in. He's kind of he wants to take his own initiative and do what Cobb's done. And so he does that. Then it's this intercutting coming back. We get back to the blonde's house. That relationship's building. Bill is really starting to become infatuated with the blonde. That's starting to build. It cuts back to the blonde's flat, and now the person that he was scouting out, so to speak, or going through is her flat. And Bill and Cobb go through her thing. She's gone, and that's the house that they scouted out, and they start going through all her stuff. Right, breaking into her house.
And earlier she had told Bill, my house got broken into. They keep saying burgled, which is just weird.
It's a British thing.
Damn
the Brits.
It had to be either British or Australian. They always have weird, funky words.
They burgled. I can't even do a British accent. So.
Yeah, it's just like some weird, like kitty names for everything. But she mentions, they rifled through my underwear drawer. They took one earring.
Yeah.
And so then it cuts to them doing this, and you're seeing why they're doing it and how they're doing it. And Cobb's the one going through the underwear drawer, and Cobb's the one who took one earring and hid it just to create confusion.
Yeah, he hides it in the piano bench.
Yeah, just like Dane Cook wanting to break in a house and take a lamp, just to create a little confusion.
It's a mind fuck.
It's a mind fuck. That's exactly what it is.
That's what it is.
Yeah. And you know what? It'd be kind of fun to do that. I'm not saying anyone should break in any houses.
We're not condoning it.
Right. But is there any fun if you can't see the reaction later, though?
Well, that's what I love about how Nolan's put this together is that as the viewer, we're aware, at least to a degree, that Cobb and Bill are in on this break-in. And at this point, we don't think the blonde's part of what's going on.
Right.
And so it's fun to see her respond to the mind fuck.
Right.
She's setting him up, right?
Yeah.
I mean, because they have Bill and the blonde start to have a conversation about fears and things she's scared of, and she's talking about her ex-boyfriend again, the criminal. She's talking about the things that he's done in his past and that he's done in front of her.
Well, and when they cut back to her watching this dude get murdered with a hammer.
So that's what it flashes back to,
yeah.
is the things that he's done, yeah.
This is wonky, man. This did not feel real. I mean, we're talking about a gun not feeling real in your hands.
Yeah.
Like you're not looking real when someone's holding it. This didn't feel real. I mean, it was just like little thud on one finger and the guy's screaming, little thud on the other finger, and then a little thud on the head and he's dead.
Yeah.
It's just like, I mean, I understand low budget, first film. I'm not expecting over the, perfect.
But that wasn't, I get what you're saying.
It took me out of it a little bit.
And I agree, but that didn't take me out quite yet. What took me out is when she has to clean it up, and it's a rug, there's like a pool of blood about this big, like for those that are listening, like a 5-inch diameter of blood. Whereas like if you were busting fingers and heads especially, right?
Right.
Though when you knock your head, blood gushes.
It's going to gut. It's going to squirt everywhere. It's going to gush. It's going to get all over. It's going to get on the piano.
First grade
walls.
Basketball courts. Viewmont Elementary.
Dude, it's brutal, man. Brutal first grade basketball. That's brutal.
It was going down, Alan. I was getting heated. I go up for the layup, right? And you're
6 foot hoops.
8 foot hoops, and you have no coordination.
Of course,
you're in first grade.
Yeah.
I thought I did. I was like, I got this layup, and your layup is not coordinated. It's like all over wonky.
Right.
But I jump to try to shoot it. My friend undercuts me. It's that asphalt with the little rocky gravel pits in it.
It's the worst.
I get undercut, so I'm going down head first.
Oh, shit.
When I'm little, I'm a towhead, total towhead, blonde as can be. Hit the ground. Immediately, it looks like Carrie all over my face.
Oh, my God.
My blonde hair is dark red, just covered. All my friends are freaking out. They think I'm dead.
Yeah,
they're like, he's dying. Because they're first.
Oh, my God.
He's dying. Yeah. Gabe's dying.
Yeah.
You know? And so my point to this story is, like you're saying, that when she cleans this up, it's literally a fight. Come on, Nolan. For all his intricacies and all his detail and specificity, that he dropped the ball there.
Dude, it was a $6,000 budget. They didn't have enough corn syrup. They didn't have enough
It's black and white though, so get
That's
that
true.
Hershey's chocolate out.
Pull the old Hitchcock.
Yeah, and
Get
he
the
actually
it was
mentions
actually Bosco.
Yeah.
I just learned that.
Oh, okay.
I just listened to Inside Psycho again.
Oh yeah, that's a great podcast.
Great podcast. Yeah, it was Bosco.
We aspire.
Yeah, we do. We do.
But yeah, and actually, you know, what's funny in the interview that I watched with Nolan, he actually mentions a lot of his influences, and one of his influences is Hitchcock. So borrow from that influence.
It's very famous.
You've been building a great film, and then all of a sudden, you take us out. You're trying to show a murderous criminal.
This is a murder. Like this is a very huge turning point.
It's a brutal murder.
Yeah. It is a brutal murder.
It's getting late. No, it's a brutal murder. You would think that you'd see a lot more blood. I mean, it's a hammer, so it's like
you would also think that the guy would swing it with a little bit more force.
That
was the thing. It was just like
I wanted a little Tarantino-esque action.
Yeah, a little bit more. I mean, this is a huge turning point in the movie because we understand just how dangerous this guy is.
We know that's part of the blonde's fears is
exactly.
that she's worried about her ex-boyfriend.
And we also know that Bill is now dipping his toe into this world.
Yeah.
He's very jealous of this girl, and he's pursuing this girl. Now Bill's in immediate, serious danger.
Yeah.
And I think that you'd want to amp this up just a little bit. Not over the top, just a little bit.
You could Tarantino it up a little.
Yeah, seriously.
And then it kind of leads into this conversation eventually where she's talking about her boyfriend blackmailing her essentially with, I guess, nude photos because he's a pornographer, underground criminal, and he's got these photos and these negatives of her naked, and he could exploit her or blackmail her.
Yep.
And they're in, you know, when I say it out like that now, I go, that's stupid.
Yeah, well, that's what I was thinking.
But actually, when I was watching it, I thought it, but then I also was like, believable.
Well, she's got half-naked pictures of herself all over her house.
In her apartment.
And so to me, I was like, that's a little...
Yeah, her moral code wasn't that. But nonetheless.
Well, and as we do get into this movie, it is getting a little bit more ridiculous. Like, it's not bad. It doesn't get to the point where I'm like, ugh. But there are some moments like that take me out of it.
Yeah.
When I was pictures, I was like, yeah, I mean, you probably don't want them to get out. But also, weren't you dating a pornographer? And it's kind of implied that she was working for him, too. Implying that maybe she was
but she might not have been.
But still, she's got half-naked photos of herself.
But I think
No,
I agree with you, and I think it's a little soft.
Sure.
But I think that you could venture to say that he could use those and just publish them in the magazine.
For sure.
Which she may not have wanted.
Sure.
And Bill, because he's falling for the blonde, decides that I can get the negatives out of the safe. She's also playing him like a film, a Black Widow.
Oh, totally.
Vixen.
Totally.
Film noir stereotype.
Yep.
She does really well. I like her acting. She's really good and plays into those roles quite nicely. But she basically sets him up, and we don't quite know that even quite yet. We almost think that she's being real with Bill. But it does kind of divulge itself. It did for me when she was saying, oh, we can go, you can go to the safe, and that's where the photos and the negatives are, and there might even be some money in there.
Right.
And then on top of that, he's like, well, I think I can do it, but how are we going to get in? We'll never get in. And she's like, I know the combination.
How convenient.
This is where I went.
How convenient.
So even more than the blood, I went, okay, now. But what I hated was Bill. There was no questioning on Bill's end.
Well, and I can kind of buy that a little bit just because
he's infatuated with her.
Not only that, but every single thing that's been brought to him. Hey, let's break into these people's house. Okay. Hey, let's go rob these people. Okay. You know, he just is going along. With everything, and plus he's totally infatuated with her. So I know what you're saying. Especially when we know how dangerous this ex-boyfriend is.
Yeah.
But I'll let it pass a little bit.
No, that's like what I'm saying about those other pieces too. I mean, you kind of go, but then they're passable.
Right.
He still built them in a way that can make them believable.
For sure.
But she says, I got the combination. And he's like, great. And then it cuts to, it's an intercut, because then it cuts back to Cobb. This is a previous to that scene we just saw in the timeline. And it cuts back to Cobb and Bill at a restaurant. And they're at a very nice restaurant, 5-star, big, nice restaurant.
This is disheveled Bill.
And it's disheveled Bill. And Cobb says, "You're paying for dinner." And Bill's like, "I can't afford dinner." And Cobb says, "Yes, you can." And he pulls out a credit card that he has supposedly stolen that says D. Lloyd. And he says, "All you got to do is put your signature on the check." And he's like, "What?" And he's like, "Just put," he's got to sign D.
Right.
Lloyd. So he does.
And they make him sign the credit card too, right?
And he makes him sign the back of the credit.
Right.
Yeah,
so it's
that's
in
right.
his handwriting.
It's in his handwriting.
And also, I want to say it was Dennis Lloyd, whatever the name was.
Yeah, I just put D because I
yeah.
don't remember the.
That's the name that he gave the blonde bombshell.
That's right.
That's the name he gave her.
That's right. And this is an important scene because it comes into play later.
Right.
I loved how he kind of intertwined it. It's funny because in that scene, when you initially watch it, you go, it has no relevance.
Right.
Who cares?
Right.
He's just being a criminal and faking a signature on the back of a credit card, which is a federal offense, right? I don't know.
I would imagine.
I don't know.
Yeah,
I'm not
I would imagine.
It's got to be more than a little petty crime,
I
right?
would think so, yeah.
I don't know. I'm not I should call a lawyer. Don't listen to me. I'm just talking out my federal offense. People are like,
you
listen.
worried about something here, Gabe? Should we?
No, but I said federal offense.
Right.
Like, is it? Is it?
I don't think it's a felony.
Okay, I was gonna say.
I mean,
maybe I was
no, I don't
upping
think
it up. I was upping it too much, I think.
I think it would depend on how much you're spending on that stolen credit card.
Right. This is a ploy for later, but Cobb convinces Bill to sign the card under a different name. And immediately after, we see a scene where, once again, it's the intercutting, so just be aware that it's kind of changing time and space. Does cut back to Bill in his flat, shaving. So,
and cutting his own hair.
Cutting
too.
his own hair. Doing a pretty good job, I might say.
I know. I was looking at that, and there's no way I could do that, man.
No way.
I'd slice. I martyrs myself. Slice my skin right off.
There would be more blood than
Than your head trauma.
Yeah.
Than the murder. The vicious hammer murder.
Well, there wouldn't be more blood than my head trauma in first grade, but there would definitely be more blood than the murder from the blonde's ex-boyfriend.
The brutal murder with a hammer.
So Bill changes his appearance. What he's really trying to do, and this is, of course, just very recently after he met Cobb in that timeline. It's happening relatively quick right after he's met him. He's trying to emulate Cobb. He's going to shave and clean up and put a suit on and go through that whole system of trying to look different, because Cobb actually makes fun of him. He actually says, "You don't have, just because you're because after they leave the restaurant where he signs the credit card, Cobb's like, "Hey, you don't have to." Just because
you're a thief doesn't mean you have to look like one.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah. Now in the timeline, this is where I got a little confused because I wanted to know if when they took her belongings, that's before they actually built a relationship, before Bill started to fall for her.
Yes. In
the timeline.
Yes.
And that's the only part, and I think I got it right, and I think we're on the same page. That was the only part where I got confused for a second, where I was trying to remember if they took the belongings before Bill had a relationship with her or after, but it was before.
Because they went in there, and I think that's what got him infatuated. That's why he followed her to the bar.
That's right.
And decided to hit on her.
There we go. So, but they take her stuff, and inside, we see he's got money inside and different trinkets and different things that are important to her, to the blonde. That's the next scene. The next scene after he's going through the trinkets, which is happening further back in the timeline, it goes back forward again, where he's got a relationship with the blonde, and she's given him the combination to the safe, and he's in her ex-boyfriend's criminal, or his club, or wherever he's owning his place of business, and he's at the safe trying to get the photos of her, the nude prints,
right,
and simultaneously there's a bunch of
A
cash.
shitload of money.
A shitload
of money.
So Bill's now in the place of business of her ex-boyfriend, and he's trying to get the money. And this is where he's trying to figure out he's even talking to himself, like you mentioned, like he's like, bag. He's trying to figure out where to place all this money. Then somebody kind of mysteriously appears.
Right.
You think it's some kind of bodyguard or security of the office or
that was
something?
my impression.
And
a hired goon.
This is not a great interaction in terms of a fight.
No, not at all.
But
let's just say that early on, Nolan action was not Nolan's strength. Directing action and shooting action was definitely not something that he did very well.
Because they have an altercation where Bill pulls out or has the hammer and takes a swing and knocks him, but it's just kind of clunkily done.
Yeah, very, very, very much so.
But he knocks the guy out, and then it shows Bill later, right after that, he's like unstrapping. What he's ended up doing is taping all the cash from the safe on him underneath his clothes, like taped it against his arms and his waist and all over. Yeah. This is where, once again, there's a little confusion, not in the story, but like on how to describe it, because this is just right after this is where we see Cobb become angry with Bill because Cobb discovers that Bill has a relationship with the blonde.
Yeah. So,
we've now, as a viewer, also discovered, right, that Cobb and the blonde are in it together.
They're an item, and they're also working together.
And we just barely learned that, and then this subsequent scene, it appears that Bill has also been sleeping with the blonde, and this is new information to Cobb.
Right.
And that's how it's played out, at least.
Right. And that's when it ends up being Cobb that beats the shit out of Bill.
Yes.
And shoves the gloves into his mouth.
Like we were alluding to earlier.
Right.
So this is like we said.
This is where the twist. I mean, this is the twist, basically. This is the twist when you realize that Cobb and the blonde have been playing him the whole time.
They've been playing
the entire time.
And this is where we'll get into at the end, because I have some questions and I might even be a little confused on a certain connection on how it plays out. But the concept is we find out that, like we said, Cobb and the blonde actually have been working together. And then the subsequent scene, Bill reveals to Cobb, hey, I've been sleeping with her. And Cobb's angry.
Mm-hmm.
But isn't that what he wanted?
I think so.
This is the question I have is he's upset, or it would appear that he's upset, but it's almost like that's what he wanted to happen.
Yeah.
Is for them to build some kind of rapport and relationship. Like that was his mastermind scheme all along.
Right. Well, and later Cobb is talking to the blonde, and he said, "Did you really have to sleep with him?" And she said, "You told me to if I had to."
Yeah.
So I don't know why he was so angry and why he beat the shit out of him.
Yeah. Because
feels like a loose end.
A little bit. But nonetheless, Cobb takes him out, beats him up, and this then becomes the scene where we now realize in the first 10 minutes of the film, we saw a cut of this scene, like you were mentioning with the glove in the mouth, and now we know what that means.
Right.
This is why I think he's so good at the intercut, because he'll introduce it 30 minutes before, and then it comes into play later on, and you go, oh, and you see how those conventions work.
He introduces elements of the story at just the right time, keeps you wanting to know more, and then reveals at just the right time later on.
Yeah.
He's a mass. It's not too early. It's not too late.
It's that timing.
The timing is just perfect with the editing. And he's in everything he does. And it keeps you wondering, and it keeps you thinking about the film after you've seen it, which I think is the mark of a great film.
I agree, because you can go back to it or continually, have it in your mind in some way.
Yep.
Yeah. Like you were saying, Cobb kind of expresses his frustration with the blonde sleeping with Bill.
Mm-hmm.
Like, why'd you sleep with him? These kind of things. But then it cuts to Bill opening the envelope. This is now he's gone to the ex-boyfriend's place of business. He's taken the guy out with the hammer. He comes back. He's got all the money taped to him, and he opens an envelope where he believes to be the nude photos of the blonde.
Right.
And when he opens them, it's not her.
It's not her.
And they're not nudes.
They're not nudes. They're just they look like headshots.
They're headshots of some girl, some random girl. And so this is kind of where you start to understand that the Bill's been had.
And this is where he understands that too.
He gets
He
upset.
just doesn't understand why.
Yeah.
And at some point, and I want to say it's the next scene, there's some exposition between Cobb and the blonde where they explain that Cobb was burgling. It's never going to not sound funny. He was burgling a house, and he came across a dead woman, a dead old woman who had been murdered. So he stumbled across a crime scene, essentially, and so he tried to get the hell out of there, but someone saw him. They didn't get a good look, but they saw that he was someone wearing a suit and tie, short hair, and so the exposition, they basically say, we just need someone who kind of looks like me
to double him,
to throw the scent off a little bit. That's why they've been playing him.
That's why they've been playing Bill
the whole time because
setup.
Bill is a loner. He's easily manipulated, and he was perfect. And they just happened to come across him following Cobb. So then Cobb sneakily followed Bill and learned all about him and was like, this is perfect. This is the perfect setup. This is the perfect fall guy. And this is what we're doing.
That's such a... This is where this is tough.
It gets a little wonky here.
Not that it's plausible, but it's a little too convenient.
It's like a little too Ocean's 11 where just everything lines up perfectly.
Yeah.
And and Bill does exactly what they wanted him to do and reacted. Like, how did they know he was going to go up and talk to the blonde in the bar?
And the way that he finds out, too, is because Bill, once he finds the photos aren't of her, when he goes back to her apartment and she opens the door, he slaps her.
Yeah.
And then the exposition of what you just gave is revealed, that she's been in on it. Now Bill knows.
Right.
And
she reveals the whole plan
the whole plan to him.
He knows he's been had.
This is where I have question. So, like I said, it's plausible, but there's a little convenience factor there.
For sure.
Towards the end of the film, it's starting to come together. Essentially, the detectives are on Cobb's case, and as part of that, they've set it up now where they have Bill as an essential suspect. So that plan that Cobb had to kind of double as him as the potential person who left this old lady's house who had been murdered is coming together because the detectives are now tracing Bill's scent.
Yeah, and
it does work.
He even tells the blonde, he's like, I'm going to go to the cops and explain everything. Because she just revealed the whole plan, and she doesn't seem to give a shit. She's just like, whatever. Like, we were just using you. I'm sorry, whatever. I didn't want it to happen, but you just kind of fell into the wrong place at the wrong time. And he's like, I'm going to go to the cops. I'm going to explain everything. And she just basically says, I wouldn't do that if I were you.
Yeah.
You know, you can do it, but I wouldn't do that.
Because all the evidence is still kind of pointing in your direction.
100%. And he's just like, I'm just going to explain it all. And that's exactly what he does. But here's where I'm a little confused. Because when he goes to the cops,
the
police officer says, we're not investigating an unsolved murder of an old woman. So why did they need Bill in the first place if it wasn't for him to be the fall guy for the murder?
Yeah, because when Bill goes back to confess everything to the detectives, the scent on him is strong for the detectives. They really believe that he's the one responsible for the woman.
But here's my question. So, during this scene with the detective, it cuts back to a scene with the blonde and Cobb.
Yes.
So at first he's talking to the detective and he tells him the whole story. He's like, "This is what happened. You know, there's this guy named Cobb. He's been burgling everybody and you know he killed he stumbled into a crime scene of an old woman who's dead. But then." The detective says there's no unsolved murder of an old woman. So, but then I think I just answered my own question. So my first question was why did they need to use him in the first place?
Right.
If there was no dead old woman. But then it cuts to the scene with Cobb and the blonde, and basically they give a little bit more exposition, and then Cobb murders or implies that he murders the blonde.
Right.
So I think the whole idea was setting him up for the blonde's murder. It's a little convoluted, but I think that must be the whole. That must have been the end game.
Yeah, I think, and because this is where I even got confused at the end. I was trying to figure out what the setup was about, and now you're going through that makes sense. Where ultimately Cobb has gone through this whole process. He's played Bill the whole time. Mm-hmm. He's also played the blonde.
Totally.
The whole time.
Because basically Cobb works for the blonde's ex.
The
bald guy. They call it, we didn't say this, but the whole time they called him the bald guy, even though he wasn't bald. I didn't understand that. But Cobb works for the bald guy, the blonde's ex. They want to kill the blonde because she saw her ex murder that dude in her house.
Yeah, she was a witness to a murder.
And basically get 5 drops of blood on her rug.
No, when I first watched it and we're talking through it now, I was uncertain. Those were like I had questions about the end, but now as we're talking through it, now I go, okay, I see what happened.
That's a very long con to frame one guy for like they just showed this organization killing a guy in cold blood with a hammer. And now they're going to go, I don't know how long this whole process, this whole story took. I'm going to assume like weeks and months. They're going to go through this long process just to frame some random guy for a murder they could have just killed and just got rid of the body. No body, no murder.
Why did they kill him at her apartment? Am I missing a piece
That's
there?
a very good question. That's a good question because she did say that he called me and he said he needed to use my apartment for something.
Yeah.
And next thing I know, they have this guy and he's on the ground and they're smashing his fingers.
Or was that guy in a relationship with her?
I have no idea.
It doesn't allude that I remember.
No.
It doesn't say that.
They have access to an empty warehouse. Why not just fucking kill him there?
This is what I'm getting. I don't.
Unless
the only thing I can assume would be that the guy they killed had a relationship with the blonde and it pissed off the boyfriend, and they were trying to prove a point, and then because she was a witness to it, they're like, let's take her out too.
Could be. 'Cause she said that they told, this is at least what she told Bill, that the dude owed the bald guy money.
Yeah.
But maybe they did have a relationship.
I mean, that's
the fact that we have to reach this far and try and guess the motives here is not good.
It's a long con
for an organization that has no problem just murdering the shit out of anybody.
Especially if the blonde, I mean, she doesn't even have a name, so whatever.
Right.
But does she have people that would know that she's gone? I mean, maybe she's an isolated individual with no family and friends.
Could
be.
be.
Why wouldn't you just take her out? So there's a little bit. The one thing that he does well here, and we've talked about this in the beginning, is the editorial and the back and forth. I love the intercutting and the suspense build between Bill divulging the story and then cutting back to Cobb talking to the blonde, and then Bill learning new things, and then back and forth, and then Bill finally being divulged to Bill that Cobb had set him up the whole time in everything. The D. Lloyd signature,
right? The whole
ring,
thing
the
is
whole
great.
thing,
and Nolan. I mean, we've been kind of praising this editing the whole time, and it's true because not only does he kind of reveal things at the right time, but he also lets the audience in on the plan at just the right time, and still keeps the protagonist in the dark.
Yep.
And that builds some tension into suspense. I think it's just done very well. Motives aside, what did you think of the twist?
I liked
the multiple
it.
twists. I guess there are 2 twists.
And I liked it. Like we talked about, there might be some missteps, but ultimately I really liked it. I love how it ended.
Yeah, me too.
That shot of Cobb in the street, I mean, it's so Nolan.
Right, it's very Nolan.
That was
very Nolan.
He borrowed his own piece for Inception.
Yeah, for sure.
Like that. Do you know what I mean? Like that felt like an Inception shot.
Right.
So the end is after it's all revealed that Bill's screwed. Mm-hmm. The blonde is dead. Cobb basically
played everybody.
This shot, though, of him in the street, and then you see a foreground subject walk in front of him, and then as he passes, Cobb's gone.
It's gone, yeah.
I loved that.
Very Nolan,
very Nolan, but I loved that shot. What did you think of the ending?
I love both twists. So at first, when you find out that Cobb and the blonde are playing Bill, I audibly out loud said, "Oh!" Like that was cool. I like that.
Yeah.
And then the second twist where he kills her at the end, kind of saw it coming a little bit, but it was still really cool. I really enjoyed that. And then that final shot, I just loved it. It's just
final
cool.
shot's awesome.
It's just fun,
Because Cobb's an ultimate mystery.
Right.
Is his name Cobb?
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not.
So I thought that was great. Yeah, a lot of fun pieces to this movie.
And it really sets the template for what Nolan does down the road.
Yeah, and once again, you look at this, he makes a 70-minute feature film over the course of 52 weeks, filming on Saturdays when the crew could do it and the cast. And he puts together a really nice film.
And I got to give him props for not throwing a bunch of bullshit in there just to extend it.
True.
Like,
I mean, I love the idea of him being confident with what it is,
right?
And not because this is one thing I can't stand. I particularly can't stand. We get so caught up around a 2-hour mark. Mm-hmm. I can't stand it.
Yeah, me neither.
If it's that's fine. I don't have anything against it, but if it's 70 minutes, let it be 70 minutes.
Right. I agree, 100%.
And I love that he was cool. The thing, in these interviews I've been watching with him, and we were talking about this before the podcast, but he's so confident, so cool, so composed. He knows what he wants to do.
Well, and it's ironic that his first feature was 70 minutes and very good and very well reviewed and well loved, and his later movies are so long.
They're so long, yeah. So a couple pieces of trivia, then we'll get into a couple ratings. Nolan came up with the idea for the film because he was robbed.
Oh, cool.
So that was kind of an inception, no pun intended. Yeah. He's got a lot of references to previous filmmakers and movies. If you look on the walls in the production design, there's shots of little photos of Marilyn Monroe.
Yeah.
A poster of Sunset Boulevard, which is a classic film from 1950. He even has a reference to Reservoir Dogs.
Oh, does he?
Yeah. There's a poster of this film in Bill's flat.
Oh, really? I didn't notice that.
Yeah.
So that had to have come out, right when they're doing production, probably.
No, because
Reservoir Dogs came out
in 92. So
okay.
it's got years on it.
Yeah.
In the interview that I watched while we were researching for this, was Nolan was talking about how he was influenced from not necessarily stylistically, as is evident with his kill scene versus a Tarantino kill scene, but he was influenced by the concept of like Kevin Smith and Tarantino, who could go make movies for little to no budgets and make them fun and entertaining and very film-like and get them recognized. So that was part of his inspiration. So I think it's a little throw-out homage to, hey, you guys did a small,
right.
Your first film was Reservoir Dogs. You did it for little to no budget, a bigger budget than this film. But nonetheless, that was a little homage to him.
And Cobb is he's a little Mr. Pink as far as
kind of is,
staying professional.
He's professional the
and
whole
he gets
time.
away with it.
That's
See, when
true.
you lose your head is when you go down, man. Got to stay professional.
That's true. Nolan borrows from himself because I don't remember in Insomnia, but I do remember in Memento that there's a method of breaking into an apartment with a credit card, but I don't remember that in Insomnia. So the credit card break-in, where Cobb uses that in this film, it's also done in Memento and it's done in Insomnia. So he's kind of borrowing from himself there. In the second apartment that Bill and Cobb break into, there's a Batman sticker on the door.
I did notice that.
Yeah.
I did notice that.
I thought that was kind of cool. And there's obviously no intention there. It just happened to be, which is kind of a cool tie-in. Another thing, like he's a cinephile, Nolan.
Totally.
Because there's another reference to The Shining. And what's funny is we've done a podcast on The Shining and we've done a podcast on Reservoir Dogs. And there's 3 small photos of here's Johnny, your favorite line. from The Shining.
Oh, yeah.
Appear on the protagonist's wall. So on Bill's wall.
I don't remember any of that. Usually
I mean, you got to look in the background, right? So, and there's a character named Daniel Lloyd.
Daniel Lloyd, that's right.
So, that's right. Which is a direct borrow.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's Danny. And then Lloyd is the bartender from The Shining.
So they're comboed it up.
Right.
So that's what I mean. He's a cinephile. Like I love him for that because he's always like borrowing from other things or just kind of paying homage.
Which is like John Carpenter lifted the name Sam Loomis for the Doctor in Halloween straight from Psycho.
Oh yeah,
straight like just Sam Loomis.
That's it.
Yeah,
Sam. That's funny. We talked about this. Principal photography took over 1 year. They were able to film on Saturdays for about 15 minutes of footage, right, until the photography had been completed. That's crazy to me. And then here's another homage. We have a reference to Casablanca, another poster in Bill's flat. So like
How
I
many
said,
posters does he have in there?
He's a history buff, a film history buff. So this is following a lot of good things here. Give me where you kind of sit on the film and what you're feeling about it, a little summation, and maybe throw out that rating.
Well, one thing I did want to mention real quick is I thought the acting was outstanding, except for Bill.
You didn't like Bill?
No, there was some time like when he's with the cops, and they're basically telling him, "Well, we know you killed the blonde." His react. I mean, there are a couple of times where he has a reaction that's just so like, "No, I didn't. What are you talking about?" It's just so not very good. I think he's great when he's being curious, but when he actually has to have a natural reaction, it just didn't connect for me at all. Other than that, though, I thought the acting was fantastic from everybody. I thought all the performances were great, which is especially impressive when you think of these people are like getting paid nothing, and they had to do it on weekends for a year. I mean, that sucks.
It's crazy.
That sucks. And the fact that they could bring in these performances is pretty impressive. So that, and then the ending, super wonky. It's convoluted, little convenient. That's bringing down the rating a little bit, but I still really enjoyed it. I honestly, like I said, I didn't expect to. I saw the black and white. I saw the aspect ratio. And I'm like, oh, it's going to be another who's knocking at my door. It's going to be so pretentious and shitty. But I was immediately sucked in, and I really enjoyed it. So I'm kind of going back and forth. I think I'm going to go 7.5 claw hammers.
That's good.
To the head.
All right. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
That's pretty high.
I like it. For me, it's really high.
One thing about Nolan that I love is he's always referenced his beginnings, and he always, and for any filmmakers out there and for ourselves, I love that he had mentioned that he didn't have any formal film school training. He ended up, like a lot of stories that you hear, taking his dad's Super 8 camera.
We all did that.
And did stop motion and animation and some narrative shorts and things like that, and just started filming stuff. And it stuck with him, and he always continued it. As he got older, he ended up getting a job doing a lot of kind of corporate media interviews with CEOs, just kind of stuff like that. But in this interview that I listened to, I love that he still referenced that. He said, what I loved about that is even though it wasn't that creative outlet I was aspiring for, I learned a lot. So I learned how to set up lights quickly. I learned various operations of the camera, and I really learned how to be able to get into a situation and do something for little to no budget. So he was kind of cool because he was paying homage to that grounding, or that the foundation that he had as a corporate media guy. And that lent itself into this, and he would just start shooting short films and things like that. He made a short film called Doodlebug.
Doodlebug.
Have you ever seen it?
Nuh-uh.
It's very short. It's 3 or 4 minutes. You should go watch it. It's called Doodlebug. It stars Bill.
Does it?
Uh-huh. And it's special effects kind of combo for the time. It's really fun little short 3-4 minute short film. And then he did a couple other things and a couple other short films, and then came into this. I love, once again, we talk about this a lot. I love the growth. I love seeing something. We all perceive Chris Nolan with 2020 lens, the year 2020, right?
Mm-hmm.
We look at his past 20 years and we go, oh, we got, like we talked about, the Batman franchise, Inception, Interstellar, right? We all kind of look at it that way, but I love the foundation here of this film. I think first time out the gate, pretty damn good.
Yeah.
Really well put together. Fun movie to watch. Like you mentioned, some areas of convolution and confusion. And now that we've talked through it, I think I get that ending a little more. It's a little more solidified. I love the neo-noir look and feel.
Yeah, I do too. It feels good. The atmosphere is great.
You can sense his homage to that era.
Mm-hmm.
And like we just mentioned, all those little throwouts that he has. He's super educated when it comes to film history. And you sense that with his style of this, which is like taking that crime and mystery thriller kind of noir feel and building it into a contemporary sense.
I mean, even having the little details like a really loud typewriter, just those little things just build the atmosphere a lot.
Yep. So I'm in on it. I like it a lot. I think it's a fun movie. And I'm probably not as high on the list of Nolan's probably not on my highest list of directors. I like him. I really do. But I'm still, and what's funny is when you watch their films and do research about them, you become more infatuated with them.
For sure.
It's almost like a timely thing because in a year from now, I may not feel that way.
Right.
And when I watched Interstellar, originally I was like, yeah. But this film was, what's funny about that, by the way, we walked out of the Cinerama Dome. We'll bring it full circle because we walked out of the Cinerama Dome, and I went to Todd and Brandon, and I went, hey, look, there's a film school over there. Flash forward 1 year, I was teaching.
You were teaching at that film school.
At that exact film school.
That's pretty cool.
But I'm not. He's probably not on my list of filmmakers in the top 5. I mean, he might be.
Yeah.
But good film, well done, put together, editorially fantastic.
Yeah.
Like we talked about. I agree with you. I thought the acting was good. Cobb's the best.
Oh, by far.
Cobb is amazing.
And the funny thing is, he's not in acting at all.
That's what we talk. He's not.
That's the bizarre thing. He delivers a stellar performance.
He's great.
He could have gone far.
I wonder about this too, because ultimately Nolan kind of builds his people and he works with them. You see Tom Hardy, you see Leo, whoever it is. He does change it a little bit, but there are people that he kind of uses or reuses, Michael Caine or whatever it is, like. Cobb, the actor who played Cobb, man, he could have really taken off his career.
I know.
I think
Where is he now?
He's an architect. It sounds like.
Oh no, Cobb. Yeah, I thought you meant Bill. But
do you know what I
right.
mean? Though,
yeah.
That he could have really killed it. He could have been Matthew McConaughey's character.
Seriously, he would have done it great too. Yeah,
he was a good actor.
He was outstanding.
So,
I always like the villains the most, though. I just always have.
They're always funner characters.
They always are.
They're
always
just funner.
Are. Yeah.
Rotten Tomatoes got it 80% critics, 85% audience. And then IMDb sitting at a 7.5. So that, once again, pretty good for IMDb.
It is.
I'm going to go in with a rating of 6.9.
6.9. Very specific.
I've been watching Barstool Sports.
Yeah.
You know David Portnoy?
I don't think so.
He does pizza reviews.
Oh yeah.
He cracks.
He's the owner of Barstool Sports, right? Yeah.
He cracks me up so bad. He walks out, one bite. Everybody knows the rules, and then he takes a bite, and then he goes 6.3. I just love.
And then again he says it again. One bite. Everyone knows the rules. It takes another bite.
It takes 5 bites.
Yeah, 5 bites. Yeah. Exactly.
I think he's hilarious. I've been seeing him come up on my social threads, and it's just funny to watch him. But when I was watching him, I was like, I like it. I like the style because those 1/10 of points matter.
Sure.
So sure. I don't, and when people come in to review with him, he goes, and they do a rounded number. He's like, that's weak.
No, they really do matter, though.
But it does. Yeah. I agree. And I wasn't...
You take your scale from 20 to 100, basically.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So 6.9 on
6.9
Following by Chris Nolan.
6.9 what?
This is a 6.9 missing earrings.
Okay, missing pearl earrings.
Missing pearl earrings, yep.
That means there's 6.9 found pearl earrings somewhere, too.
Maybe. Getting too complicated.
It's just trying to follow in Nolan's footsteps, that's all.
This is the Tame Aperture podcast, reviewing Following by Chris Nolan. Go check us out at www.tameaperture.com. Ellen, thanks for bearing with me through this little bit of a convoluted mess to try to walk through in a linear fashion because it's not edited linearly.
Oh, yeah. I'm not going to bitch out like Brandon.
Yeah.
I'm here.
Brandon, on the next cast, he's got to do something to make up for missing so many podcasts.
I agree.
I don't know what it is yet, but we'll put him through the fire, whatever
He's going to have to tell some more incriminating stories, I think.
He's got to incriminate himself live on air.
Yeah. He's not too shy about doing it.
He's okay.
Caddyshack, he went on and on, man.
Yeah, so go to www.tameaperture.com, listen to our previous episodes, listen to Brandon incriminate himself on Caddyshack. This is TameAperture.com. Thanks, everybody, and tune in next week. Bye.
Tame Aperture podcast is produced by Dutch Angle Pictures in association with Studio B Productions. Listen, watch, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, and YouTube.